All right. So we talked a little bit going back about the big picture, the big process of photosynthesis. There are two major parts, the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. One uses light directly to make ATP and NADPH. And the other, the Calvin cycle, uses the things made in the light reactions to reduce carbon dioxide to a higher energy carbon molecule called G3P, which can then be made into many other things. So in this diagram, I'm showing you an illustration that represents the many different energies that a photon, also known as a particle of light, have. Photons are particles that are emitted mostly from the sun, and they can be emitted from light bulbs and ultraviolet light and other sources like that, but they are particles that can carry a specific amount of energy. It is these particles, called photons, that will be used to drive the chemical reactions that make photosynthesis the efficient process that it is. So never forget that photons are the primary source of energy for the process of photosynthesis. But the wavelengths that are important to us, especially for photosynthesis, are the visible light spectrum. All right, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the visible light spectrum is important. Now, what a prism does is separate white light, which is basically light that you cannot see, but it is received by the Earth, separates that light into its different energy levels. And the energy levels differ based on the wavelengths of the different types of light. So what a prism does is it passes white light through a prism, all right, by which the wavelengths or energy levels of the colors separate. And this is one of the first major experiments to distinctly show that white light is, in fact, a combination of many different energy, electromagnetic energy wavelength type things. All right, so we got our background in electromagnetic energy. We're going to be focusing mostly on the visible light part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Although we will be mentioning higher energy waves like gamma and X-rays, ultraviolet rays, and lower energy waves called like radio waves and infrared waves. But just an importance of the understanding of why or how wave-like energy is important, how high and low energy things move in waves, and most importantly, where visible light or white light is on this spectrum and how it's important to plants. All right. So if we want to talk more about the plant cell, we can get more into the nitty-gritty. That we're going to be focusing on the organelle where photosynthesis occurs, called the chloroplast. All right. The chloroplast has many parts. Let's see. No, it's the next one. Chloroplast has an inner and outer membrane. Inside the chloroplast, it has a cytoplasm-like substance called the stroma that is specific to the chloroplast. It has these stacks in it called thylakoids. Let's move back here. All right. So each one of these stacks here is called the thylakoid, and a stack of thylakoids is called granum, and many stacks are called grana. All right. Now the thylakoids themselves have a cytosol in them called the thylakoid space, which is very similar or very alike the mitochondrial matrix. So then start making those comparisons between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Both photosynthesis and parts of cellular respiration occur in double membrane organelles, all right, that's where energy is created. So if we move further along here, talk about the plant cell. We really know all about the organelles of the plant cell. The mitochondria is where cellular respiration occurs. And please don't forget that cellular respiration still occurs in plant cells. All right. So plants, although they make their own energy in the form of sugar and ATP, can also, if they need to, break that energy down. So they would need mitochondria too. If plant cells only had chloroplasts, no mitochondria, they would only be able to make things. They wouldn't be able to break things down. So mitochondria are still important to the plant cell. All right. Again, let's do an overview of photosynthesis. All right. Photosynthesis has two major pieces: the light reactions, all right, which include an electron transport chain of proteins, and the Calvin cycle, which we call the light-independent reactions. So the light reactions or the light-dependent reactions, because they need the existence of a direct light source in order to occur. And then we have the light-independent reactions, called the Calvin cycle. All right. Both of these are going to occur in the chloroplast organelle. All right. One of them is going to occur in the stroma. The Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma. Sorry. And the light reactions occur on the thylakoid membrane. So they're going to be happening on the thylakoid membrane, in the thylakoid space, and partially in the stroma as well. Okay, here we go. Again on photosynthesis, we talked about the major parts of photosynthesis: the synthesis, the making of organic material in the form of sugars from light energy, which is the process of photosynthesis. The reactants to photosynthesis are water, carbon dioxide, and light energy. And the products of photosynthesis are oxygen and sugar in some form. Okay. So if we move right or wrong, we have all this light energy, right? The sun is constantly emitting and emitting energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation, some of it in the form of light, some of it in the form of infrared, some of it in the form of ultraviolet, some in the form of gamma rays and X-rays, and all these different forms of light energy. But plants are only going to be using a specific portion of that. They're going to be using what we call visible light. All right. Now, pigments are chemicals or molecules that are specifically designed to absorb specific electromagnetic energy with specific wavelengths. All right. Two of the main pigments in plants, and they occur in the chloroplast organelles, are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. All right. One of the most important things about these two molecules is they don't really differ that much from one another. All right. Actually, you'd be hard pressed to find the difference between these two molecules. All right. If you can find the difference between these two molecules, you'll see that the difference is very slight. I'm actually not going to tell you the difference between these two molecules. I want you to kind of figure out on your own. But there are differences between chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. All right. So these two molecules, very similar, absorb very, very different wavelengths of light. All right. So the two most common pigments in plants are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Now, plants all have these things called accessory pigments, which are designed to enhance the absorptive ability of leaves on the plants. And they also have things like antioxidant effect. They have antibacterial effects. They have anti-cancerous, antimicrobial effects as well. So generally, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B are the two most common pigments in plants that are designed to absorb light energy. But also these things called carotenoids, which carrots have a lot of. All right, you can imagine that they give off a yellowish orange color. And phytoerythrin is another plant pigment that is also designed to have an antioxidant and absorptive effect. So some of these pigments act as vitamins or nutrients for the plant and other organisms, and other pigments can act more as absorptive mechanism than others. So it's important to notice that plants have more than two pigments, although these are the two most common pigments in most plants. All right. So pigments absorb light energy. All right. Now we're looking here at the absorption spectrum of plants. All right. And what you're seeing here is the visible light spectrum here from 350 to about 720 nanometers, which is wavelengths of light. So we're looking at lower energy wavelengths here and higher energy wavelengths over here with lower. This is the distance between two peaks or two troughs or wavelength. And over here We have red, and far over here would be infrared, which basically is much lower in electromagnetic energy than all of the other colors. So if we want to focus on one, let's focus on chlorophyll A here in this aqua color. Chlorophyll A basically absorbs the most light energy that comes in around 430 nanometers, 425 nanometers maybe. All right. And then it drops, meaning it has no absorptive capability of any wavelengths of light, basically between 460 and very low, very low, very low, and then absorbs more light energy again around 680 nanometers. All right. If we look at chlorophyll B, all right, we have this green portion here. Chlorophyll B absorbs light at around 450 nanometers maximum, has a very steep drop in the amount of light energy it can absorb, and then has a smaller peak around 660 nanometers, all right, and a smaller peak here, all right. Notice that both chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B have not one, but two peaks to them. Now, another important thing to understand is that other accessory pigments like carotenoids and phycoerythrin and another one called phycocyanin are pigments that also have different absorptive abilities. Now, the carotenoids mostly absorb between 420 and 480 nanometers, and phycoerythrin absorbs lots of light energy that is not absorbed at all by chlorophyll A or chlorophyll B or the carotenoids. And if you look at phycocyanin, phycocyanin has a peak of its absorption around 600 nanometers, and at 600 nanometers, none of the other pigments that plants have absorb light here. So as you notice, the different pigments, both the primary, chlorophyll A and B, and the accessory, carotenoids, phycoerythrin, and phycocyanin, are all designed to absorb as much possible visible light across the spectrum as possible. So if the sun is emitting energy, a very high energy, like gamma rays and UV rays, and very low energy, all right, and also energy in the visible light spectrum of 350 to about 700 nanometers. Plants are designed and evolutionarily designed and adapted in order to absorb as much visible light as possible, which is why all of these different photosynthetic pigments exist in the first place. which allows the absorption spectrum of all these pigments and accessory pigments, the ability for plants to absorb as much light as possible.